back on April 2nd. The minutes have been distributed to the committee. Are there any corrections, changes, amendments? Please provide them now. Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Seconded.
Second.
Kate Whitman.
I'm not hearing anyone. Is it my problem or is it?
Duke is here.
This is Rusty. Can you hear me? Anybody hear
I
me?
can hear you, Rusty.
I can
hear you.
I can hear you, Rusty.
Okay, we're having
You
a
have to
problem here.
unmute. You have to unmute.
May I ask Amy Samuelson, who organized the meeting, to speak for a minute to see whether there's a problem with the my microphone or maybe my line
Sure.
of input?
Hi, Kip. This is Amy, and I am not having a problem hearing you or any of the others.
I can hear you, Kip.
I can hear you, Kip.
Okay, well, maybe it was my micro. Maybe it was my.
You have to unmute your microphone because it usually is unmuted. It's muted usually when you start.
No, my microphone is unmuted. The problem was my volume here. So I asked for the comments about the minutes. I heard none. I'm presuming there are none. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve, Duke.
Duke
Second.
approved. Second from Rusty. If I could just have all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Carried. The next order of business is for Rusty to talk about the final resolution of the existing solar panels on the school.
We looked at the several different scenarios regarding the solar panels. One of which was to remove the ones that are needed for demolition and place them on the roof. It turns out that we would spend significantly more money doing that than we would actually save in energy over the next 2 years. So we immediately dismissed that. So if the current schedule continues, we are going to remove 48 panels, which is 4 rows, and rehook up the rest of them and continue with the solar panel system until school gets out in 2022, at which time we will take down the balance. The good news is that in talking with the company that owns these and who we did the power purchase agreement with, is that the liquidated damages for breaking that PPA is about half of what we anticipated to be, which was about $270,000. In fact, including the removal of all of them, it'll be around $135,000, given the current schedule. That will be a cost of the project. It will be and has been added on to the budget currently. So that's where we stand now. If phases change, then we'll make the adjustments and keep them up longer as long as we can and get the benefits out of them and then take them down when it's appropriate. Questions? Okay.
Thank you, Rusty. That's good news. We can find some savings. The next order of business is we had 2 meetings this past week, one with the Architectural Review Board and one with the Planning and Zoning Commission. Amy was at both, and so was Randy. And so I'm going to start with Randy. If you could give us a brief review of what was the consequence of these 2 meetings.
Sure. Thank you, Kip. Yes, the ARB meeting was held on Wednesday, the 29th. And in general, it went quite well. I think Amy and all those that spoke did a great job. Generally well received. I think there were a couple of very minor follow-ups, but the takeaway was support for the project and of the current design that was presented. And some of the committee members, including myself, received a formal letter stating as such. So we can now tick that box, so to speak, with regards to entitlements for the project. That now adds to the approval from the EPC. And then secondly, just this past, let's just see, a couple days ago, on the 12th, we had our first formal presentation of planning and zoning. You recall about a month or so ago, we had a formal presentation, preliminary site plan and renderings, et cetera. And we covered a lot of ground. It was a lengthy meeting. Got through Kemp with an overview of the project layout, sites, renderings. We went through building height, demonstrated compliance with that provision. We went through setbacks, demonstrated compliance with that. We had a presentation from both Tig and Bond, the building committee's hired traffic engineer, as well as the peer review traffic engineer. Went through the intersection at Mansfield, the entrance off Mansfield, answered all the P&Z's questions there. Also talked about site circulation. It was great to have Luke involved there to walk through the real operational aspects of queuing, et cetera. I think that was all generally well received. So there's a follow-up meeting on the 19th, so a week from this past Tuesday. And a key issue to be discussed on that meeting will be drainage, stormwater drainage. And really the key heavy lifting between now and then is reconciling the Benesh civil engineering studies and drainage studies along with the peer review from Redness and Mead. So hopefully that will be all sorted and be the key area of focus for next Tuesday, as well as any revisiting of some of the topics that were covered on the 12th. And then if we can get through that meeting on the 19th, it would move into really more deliberation for the commission, and hopefully they can render a decision in the week thereafter or the subsequent 2 weeks. The last thing I'll mention is there's a ZBA meeting coming up on the Wednesday the 20th, and materials for that are due by Friday. They're asking for slides and the slide content. So Amy's, I'm sure, aware of that. She was copied on the email request from the zoning department, and Amy can provide color as to the ability to meet that deadline for Friday. Last thing, actually, one more thing would be building department phase 1 permits. Just as an update for the committee, originally we were seeking to obtain those, but given potential changes in phasing that we'll talk about during this meeting, that's been put on hold for the time being. So I'll stop there, Kip, and let me know if I've left anything out or if anyone wants to add anything to that.
Well, I would ask if Amy has anything to add, because she was there front and center and giving the presentation.
Thanks, Kip. No content for me to add. I think Randy did a great job describing the presentation, especially the long presentation on Tuesday night for planning and zoning and all that was included. I'm happy with the results. I think that we got good positive feedback, even from some of the critical thinkers that we ran into in the first P&Z introduction meeting. So I'm really appreciate Luke staying on the line. The meeting lasted at least 3 hours. So it was tedious, but we got through a lot of material. And so that follow-up on the 19th will include a couple of items that are open items from presentation materials this past Tuesday, and the bulk of the meeting on the 19th will be about the stormwater management, both our report and the third-party review. So to that end,
Amy, I just wanted to ask a question. Are you comfortable that Benesh will respond and deal and talk with Redness and Mead, and they'll come to an agreement as to what the issues are, and so that we'll have that mostly ironed out well before the next planning and zoning presentation, which I gather is next Tuesday on the 19th.
Correct. Yes, so Benesh has already sent around their response to the report, a written response, which is they emailed to Redness and Mead and ourselves. And this afternoon at 3 o'clock, I believe, I have a meeting scheduled to join them, where Benesh and Redness and Mead are going to review the responses and go through the process. And Jeremy Ginsburg is also going to be attending that call this afternoon. So we think he's been a valuable resource and really helpful through the town process. What we're looking to achieve is we're going to ask the planning and zoning for a conditional approval upon fulfilling the response to the third-party reviewer. The documentation for that, it's just not possible for Benesh to turn around any of the drainage changes that might fall out of the meeting this afternoon. But in order to continue the process, we're hoping that an agreement between our two firms and that presentation next Tuesday night will allow planning and zoning to approve us with the condition that we meet those items that are being negotiated between the two civil engineering firms.
Okay.
And then if I may, just to follow up on Randy's comment about the meeting May 20th for ZBA, yes, SLAM will provide the PowerPoint slides necessary to Jeremy tomorrow morning prior to that meeting. It's going to be very brief in comparison to the planning and zoning. I think it's 2 or 3 slides in total.
Okay, you may have to redo the calculation if we agree upon a different phasing approach, but it's just a question of math, I gather.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Well, it sounds like, despite all of the difficult times of remote meetings and everything else, it sounds like we're still making a pretty good progress on our schedule to meet all these hurdles, which is great. Our next, and the reason for this, the main reason for this meeting is to discuss an alternate phasing strategy. And I want to just give a little background before I turn it over to SLAM and ONG and AP to discuss this. We were originally expecting to come in on April 30th with our cost numbers on our design development. As I wrote a memo out to all of you in on the committee and the ex officio members, our numbers were quite a bit off. We had to think through what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. We're still in the process of going through what I call value management. There's lots of items on the list, and where it all comes out, we're still struggling with. However, one of the ideas that came up was the idea from Andy Ashforth was to talk about an alternate phasing strategy, which I think happens to be very, very responsive to what's going on today with regard to the COVID-19 virus and the various restrictions on education. And I think that it's a good approach, but I'd like you to sit back and listen, and then we can have a discussion about it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy Kemp and David Cravenzola.
All right, thank you, Kip. This is Kemp. So we've prepared a brief presentation for showing you where we were and or currently are, I guess I should say, with the phasing of some temporary modifications to the existing building and then building the entire new school in one phase, and then the alternate approach that is currently a value management item for consideration to make a slight modification to the building design as it stands today to enable the new building to be constructed in 2 sequences. The the K5 and ELP wing as sequence 1, and then the assembly wing as sequence 2, which will help avoid the need to take any of the existing building down in the short term, and avoid costs for modifications to the existing building to facilitate the temporary occupancy during the construction. And we think there's some value here. It will require some additional schedule, but we'll get into the details on that as we move forward. So Amy, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. So just to let you know the discussion, I think SLAM will lead off with the comparison of the phasing plans. And so Kemp and I will describe in more detail what he's just briefed you on. And then the pros and cons are lists that ONGAP and SLAM have been coordinating and through our many meetings and discussions come up with. The project schedule impact, I'll let Dave or Andy describe, and cost savings, same thing. Moving on. Reminder of the existing site plan and a reminder of the current phasing plan. So as currently designed in the documents that have been priced, we were planning on taking down the south portion of the 2 front wings of the school in order to build the new school all in one phase. And the goal of this was upon discussions, and you'll all remember that there were many different planning layouts for the building. At the time of programming and planning and schematic design, it was important that the building all be turned over at once, and that we were not having too many sequences of construction and phasing during construction. So we landed on this one, which impacted the least amount of existing building that we could still provide a comfortable and rightly sized building on the existing open space.
Amy, could I interrupt for a second? Do you have a picture of all this on the screen? I don't see anything on the screen.
I do. Is anyone else seeing it?
I see it, Amy.
I see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, I can see it too.
I can see it.
I see it.
Yep.
Once again, I'm behind the curve. Sorry.
Sorry, Kip.
I
Did
don't
you
know
join?
why.
Did you join both by phone and with the computer link?
Just the computer link.
Oh, okay. Then it could be just hidden behind one of your other open programs.
Don't worry. Go ahead. I've seen this thing already.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Yes, you have.
While we're paused here, Kip, this is Dan Baumgartner joining late. I had a disabled email until just a few minutes ago. Sorry for the delay.
Welcome to the presentation.
Thank you.
I need help with this one. You can't move
Thanks.
0 back.
All right, so moving on, and this is just a review of information you all are all aware of. ONG was able to provide the site logistics plans for phasing of the building construction as planned, and located fencing, construction fencing, and safe areas. But as you know, the construction was very tight to the existing building. And so that's something that we're going to come back to. But there was a need to provide extra tall foundation walls at the assembly wing because of the proximity to the existing building and the elevation difference between the final elevation and grade of the assembly wing, which is higher, and the existing building, in order to let both of those exist at the same time. So we hope with the new phasing, or we know with the new phasing alternate option, that we can eliminate a lot of that extra concrete work.
188, that's right.
So you can see here the site logistics plan for the end of construction would allow sort of refurbishing and finishing up the site work where the existing building had remained, but the new building would be in use from the school year 2022 on. In order to do that, we also had to make a lot of moves inside the existing building, and everything you see that's in gray on the screen is an area where we were moving program from the demolished wings and where we were needing to do new construction, for example, within the library, breaking up the existing library space to provide more classrooms, and then build or locate a new portable unit for the library. So there was some cost associated with this enabling phase that we also plan to capture in this new idea. So without further ado, the alternate phasing plan, what it does is it allows your entire existing building to stay intact, but it builds the new building in 2 phases. And everything that includes the administration wing, the new entrance, all of ELP, and all of the elementary school classrooms, we'll call it the donut, or the area around the courtyard, that will all be built as phase 1. And the assembly wing, starting at the gymnasium, including the gym, the library, cafeteria, and music rooms, those would all be built in phase 2. So
Let's make sure the mute button is on. Thank you.
Thank you. So in this alternate phase, phase 1 would include construction of the loop as I described, and your existing building would no longer need to be impacted. The full existing building as it stands now would remain for next school year. No work to be done during the summer on the school building itself. And the loop would be built. It requires some redesign at the basement level because in this area, we had located the mechanical room, a fire pump room, and some storage. We're going to have to offset that by building more basement under the existing or under the proposed administration wing. So we'd be relocating fire pump to an area here underground, and we'd be relocating the mechanical room to an area here under the administration wing. And I have a detail of that coming up. But in that redesign, that would allow us to leave the existing building intact.
Amy, before you leave that particular page,
Sure.
With the building just the academic wing, if you will, we'll have construction fencing between the 2 buildings, correct? One to be built and the existing Oxridge building.
That's correct. If you can see the, let me see if I can create a pointer here. I would expect that there would be fencing here between the new building, the construction and the existing building, and then again here.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. That site logistics plan is something that ONG will have to, revisit. One second, now I can't get out of the. Okay, so the next slide shows the floor plan. I don't know why I have text there. Oh, there we go. The next slide shows the floor plan of the lower level in the alternate phasing. So as you can see, we'd be relocating the mechanical room and the fire pump room as I described, but not building close to the existing building. Storage and the final version of the exit from the lower level at this location can be built at a later phase in phase 2. And so This describes the upper level or the main level, and what we would be doing, because the assembly wing is all going to be built in phase 2. When the building first opens, we would have to utilize the ELP for some of the program areas that are going to be still under construction. So in a temporary basis, there would be no library media center, cafeteria, or gymnasium, or the music rooms. The music rooms are easy to accommodate because the ELP classrooms will be open and available during this phase. The other spaces will have to be, temporary and compromised a little bit in square footage, but hopefully still be able to provide for you the program necessary.
If I can interject, Amy?
Sure.
This is Kemp. Just wanted to make the point that going with this phasing alternative, the use of the ELP wing would be to swing those programmatic functions that would otherwise be in the assembly wing on a temporary basis while the assembly wing is being constructed, and therefore the ELP students would be deferred from coming to this new building until this assembly wing is complete and the full occupancy of the new building is complete. And as Amy mentioned, we would potentially avoid or omit the demising walls between certain ELP classrooms in the short term to potentially create larger temporary media center, for example, as you see in the yellow block. Perhaps we would not put in the 2 demising walls between those 3 classrooms and defer that final wall construction until the end of the project, and allow us to utilize 3 classroom sized footprints for a temporary media center. Similarly, we would potentially use the ELP Commons area for a temporary cafeteria because it has an exterior access to the east that would facilitate food deliveries from some other cooking facility in the district because you would not have a kitchen just yet without the assembly wing being built. And then similarly, as we go down the page, we might use 2 classrooms for a multi-purpose / gymnasium, and then 2 others where we may put the demising wall in to create 2 individual temporary music classrooms. So the K-5 students will be able to go over to the ELP wing and use those facilities for that temporary period of time, which we anticipate to be about 8 to 9 months. And that will be reviewed by David in a minute with the schedule.
Right, thanks for that detail, Kemp. If this alternate phasing is something that's voted on today and we receive approval to move forward with, clearly there would be some new conversations with Dr. Forshaw and others. Katie, I know, has been very involved with the enabling phase meetings, and I'd like to include her on this new phasing as well. But we can immediately start meetings to program those spaces so that we know that we're opening up with the right spaces for you. Okay. This is an enlargement of the lower level floor redesign in color over top of the black lines that were the previous layout. This is just to let you know that SLAM and CES are in conversations about redesigning that area and how we can provide access for all of the mechanical ductwork and piping to still get down to serve all of the academic areas, even in its new location. And so to that end, we'd like to review the pros and cons of this new alternate phasing option. As you can see on the screen, 7 pros that we came up with. Certainly this is not an all-inclusive list. But the main thing is that the existing school stays intact as you open next year, and especially in the COVID-19 times with social distancing, probably still in effect unless we have a vaccine by September. We think that it's important to keep the school as large as possible and not reduce it in size as we had planned. So 1 and 2 is that. The general conditions does not get extended because the schedule for the construction shifts from this summer to beginning in the fall and then continues a little later, but all within the same time frame. So the duration of construction is not necessarily impacted, but just the timing is. It allows us to spend from now for another week or two to really keep discussing the value management and to make sure that we're right sizing the budget. If we go with the original phasing option, we're really pushing that schedule at this point and wouldn't be able to get the demolition started as soon as we would have liked in the summer. We can then thoughtfully go through the town approvals. There may be some rework involved that would require us to revisit or get administrative approval of some of the other approvals that we've already gained. But this will give us time to consider all of that. There are potential savings for this, and we'll let ONG and AP discuss that. But there's certainly all of the work in phase 1 on the existing building, the portable, and some of the other rework of classrooms inside would be eliminated. So that reduces the cost of the phase 1. And then the stormwater management system is also being looked at very carefully, and we might be able to save money on that as well. Cons for this alternate phasing are that you would be going into the building in 2 phases. All the students would move into the building at once, but ELP would have to be delayed. And the moves would no longer happen as was originally planned for 1 move in the summer. Now it would be winter break, possibly February break occupancy. So that is a compromise that we'd be making. As you saw in the plans, the assembly space would be compromised for the portion of the 21-22 school year. And that would include no kitchen. So lunches, hot lunches would have to be provided from one of your other schools. And it does create redesign work with impact to the fee and schedule. We think we're keeping that pretty minimal. Kemp and I have already been talking with CES. That's the bulk of the rework. So we're trying to keep that minimal and in line.
Amy, could I interject some comments here? I'd like to first of all say that I'd like to hear from Dr. Forshaw as to his thoughts with regard to this alternate approach with regard to managing the school in the coming fall season and winter season. So I'll turn it over to Luke first.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Amy, and the committee for considering this proposing this alternate phasing approach and for your consideration of it. I've obviously had a chance to be discussing this plan with the team prior to this point in time, and I think it's a terrific way to, one, most importantly, maintain the current building, just for the what Amy's already surfaced around, making sure that we have appropriate space in the building. We're not compressing any use of the building into smaller space, which is a good thing in this new era as we plan for the fall and beyond. And two, just in general, the idea of getting kids into the newer building in that 2022 school year and then phasing in the second part is very appealing. And as Amy's mentioned, we'll continue to look at the logistics behind this enabling scheme, but I think this will be much more favorable for the community, for kids, for families, So I'm very much in favor of this model and appreciate the extra time and effort put into coming up with a plan B.
Thank you, Luke. Amy, if you'd put up the pro slide one more time, I'd like us to make a comment. Hello? Okay. With regard,
Sorry, my microphone was muted.
that's
Go ahead.
okay. Item number 6, I wanted to explain that because it's an idea that we're talking about. We're still in the process. Right now, the plan has been to store a significant amount of the excavated soil on the site, and that would be in the western end of the property, which is the only playground that's really going to exist when the construction begins. We're looking at having all that soil be moved to an off-site location and then be brought back on. That would basically allow the school to have a larger, freer outside recreation area during this construction phase. It's more expensive to move stuff off-site. ONG is looking at the numbers right now. We don't have the numbers yet. We don't have a site yet. But if we were able to do that, the mention of this heavy highway grade stormwater management system was really proposed to be able to withstand the weight of up to 12,000 cubic yards of stored soil. So we would save some money there, but we'd have some extra costs. But I think the extra costs net is probably worth it if we can find the appropriate nearby site to store the soil, to give the children more space to play outside during the construction phase. I wanted to make that point first. And then on the con slide, if you may put that up, Amy, for a second. With regard to the kitchen service and things of that nature, Andy Ashworth has talked with Rusty Schreiner about this. There's a possibility that your existing kitchen and your existing cafeteria might be able to be saved, I don't know that for certain, during this whole process. So you don't have to bring stuff in from off-site, but bring it from the kitchen that you have in place while you're building your assembly wing. That's a possibility. We don't know that yet. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up, but there are options here that we're still looking at. Those are the end of my comments. Now I'll turn it back to you, Amy.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move on to the schedule and ask Dave to comment.
Sure. Thanks, Amy.
Sure.
So what we have here is a relatively high-level schedule outlining the major milestone activities with this updated approach. So what we're accounting for here, and Amy had alluded to it a little bit, is the deliverables for the actual bidding documents. At this point, we are anticipating that we are going to need approximately an additional month to get those documents ready for final approval by the committee, by the building department, by the state of Connecticut for the grant. So we have accounted for that here, and what we are looking at now is mobilizing. Yep, thank you, Amy. Mobilizing on site now the beginning of November, whereas we had been at the beginning of October. And further to the pros, again, I think it's a win because we are allowing the school to return with some sense of normalcy instead of returning to an active construction site. So I think that period of time, as we're getting ready to start up, it allows the school to get started without having having us there on site with them. So with starting in November, since it's the academic wing at this point, we're able to reduce the duration of construction time. So instead of not moving into any portion of the building until the summer of 2022, we're saying that come the end of January or beginning of February of 2022, that the academic wing we will be able to move into that, as Amy's pointing to. That allows us to then demolish the existing school starting in February, the end of February, and then start preparing the site for the new assembly wing. There is a amount of, some of that dirt that we would be storing on site has to bring up the grade. As we mentioned in one of the savings, we're reducing the amount of the foundation walls. We don't have to go all the way down because we're no longer building that assembly wing within 10 feet of the occupied school. So we have to bring that material in so we can build the foundations. And then we are talking about building the assembly wing starting in May, probably April, May of 2022, and then turning it over in its entirety again for the February break. And we have not ruled out the thought of having some rolling moves there. As soon as we can get portions of that building ready, such as the gym, the media center, as long as we can make sure that we have proper egress, we will phase some of those moves. The most intensive build of the assembly wing would be the kitchen area, but spaces like the gymnasium, obviously moving into the winter months, as soon as we can turn that over, we will make efforts to do that. So we will be, as we work through this further with the design team, we will be looking for opportunities to take that phase 2 move and maybe break it into some smaller components that are staged along the way, so that it's not just everything being done in February. And then we will be developing the site. As soon as the building's down, we're going to be developing the site, but the goal is still, as we had in the previous phase, to have the site work essentially complete before winter sets in 2022. As was the plan initially, the following spring, there's always a little come back to work to make sure that the plants and things have established themselves. So we still are in a similar situation there, but the site work will be completed at the end of 2022. We've then allowed time for move-in to the assembly wing, again, right around the winter break in February. And as Amy had presented, there were some things that we're going to do to the ELP wing to accommodate moving some of those assembly wing spaces into there. So we've accounted for about 4 weeks of time to put some of that back, to construct the demising walls that are being left out, and any other ancillary things that are either left out or changed. We can, we'll take that time, and then that's when we would be looking to move the ELP into the facility. And then we have a period of time in there for final project closeout. So we're talking about being done in April of 23 with everything, the closeout. So in summary, we have a couple moves, but the overall duration of construction on the Oxbridge campus is no longer in this scenario than it was initially. Are there any questions about that?
This is Katie Lublin. I have a question, and this actually might be more for Mike Lynch. Is it realistic that we would be able to move from the old Oxbridge building into the new academic wing in the space of 1 week over February break?
Yeah, you could make that move, realizing that you're going to move into all new furniture. So, the teachers are taking their materials with them, and so are the children, and, file cabinets, things like that. But, the bulk of the move would be furniture, and it's going to be in new classrooms and spaces. You're not moving that.
Thank you, Mike.
This is Rusty. We did that in the middle school, and it worked fine.
Great. So seeing no other questions, or as they come up, please do speak up. But at this time, I don't have a slide that describes the cost savings, but I know that behind the scenes, Dave, Andy, Kemp, and myself have been looking at that, and we have been trying to estimate what the savings would be to utilize this optional phasing schedule. We're confident that it is a savings to the project overall, to the tune of about $500,000. But I think the particulars of that are still being worked out, but I'll let Andy and Dave speak to that.
Sure. So, and you're right, Amy. When we had a discussion with some of the members of the committee earlier this week, that number was closer to a $450,000 savings. Where it stands right now is that number is increased from a $450,000 savings to at least a $550,000 savings. There are some components of it that we are still working through. One of it is trying to find the most cost-effective way of managing soils on the site. As Kip mentioned, we're looking into various opportunities to, what's the best bang for the buck? Is it to utilize off-site storage? Is it to try to find a way to keep the material on site as much as possible? So we're working through things like that. In the savings that we're showing, we are already accounting for some things like the cost to do some of the swing space work in the ELP. That's all encompassing. So that's really in essence, that number, the $550,000 savings, we're hoping that it increases to a larger credit based on what we can do with soils management and looking to see what we can do with the underground stormwater detention system. But at the least at this point is that we're looking at over $500,000 of savings in going with this approach.
Hi, this is Diane. I just wanted to ask Dave if you could just clarify. So the bulk of the savings seems to be in not going through this phase one setup, the costs related to setting up the school in our previously designed phase one and preparing it for the students and demolishing a portion of the school early, et cetera. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. And there were some premiums that we had figured on to do the demolition abatement of just that small portion of the project this summer, and then having a separate bid to do the second portion. We've recognized some savings there too, in that we're now going to be demolishing the building all as one. So there were some savings and things like that. So it wasn't all just in work that we weren't doing. It was also some synergies and things that are perhaps a little more efficient in doing it this way.
This is Rusty. I have one quick question because soil keeps coming up. Is the soil suitable for construction of the school? Has it been tested?
Yes, there is. There was a meeting, Kemp, there was a phone call this morning, correct?
Yes, I can add some clarity on that.
Thanks.
This is Kemp. We had a meeting online this morning with the geotechnical engineers, the structural engineer for the building, as well as members of the ONG-AP joint venture to discuss the suitability of the existing soils for reuse under the footprint of the assembly wing as structural based fill. And the answer to that is yes, it can be reused. It needs to be carefully managed. There are percent fines in the soil that are a little bit higher than optimal for structural fill. However, can be used as structural fill. It just needs to be compacted and managed a little bit more closely than store-bought structural fill, if you will. So we kind of agreed on a compromise this afternoon or this morning about using on-site soils as much as possible, and then potentially using brought-in structural fill for, say, the last 18 inches of the subgrade buildup, so that time can be managed more effectively. Because that's really what it comes down to, is the fussy nature of the existing soils with time and moisture content is where we could potentially lose time, and that's what the construction managers are concerned with, is the time factor. So it's not so much the ability of the soil to bear the weight, it's more of the workability of the soil. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
At this time, are there any more questions from the committee that or the ex officio members that would like to talk about this? Because we'd like to figure out whether we can go ahead with this and adopt this as the alternate phase.
Michael, and a question I would have, it sounds like the preponderance of the savings is to do with the soil storage and the reduction of costs with the detention system. And as you said, there might be an off-site location. Is there a short list that is being worked at this point? Or yes, my question is, what do we think the likelihood is to find a nearby site to handle the storage? And how quickly would we know the answer to that?
Michael, the answer to your question is there have been discussions already underway. I'm looking forward to some details in terms of the amount of area we need and parking spaces for construction workers to come out tomorrow. I think David Grevenzola is working on that. We've made contact. We're working on it, and I can't give you the odds of yes, no, whatever, but it's actively under consideration, and contact has been made, and we're trying to come up with a reasonable solution. Okay, so it's in the works. It's not just hypothetical.
Yeah, no, understood. I'm just basing our potential decision on that. The $500,000. It sounds like the majority is coming from the savings, and we don't know the likelihood yet.
Well, Mike, this is Dave. I can talk to that. Right now the 550 is based upon a conservative approach with the soils. The idea is that the $550,000 savings would be a starting point, and the savings would increase based upon what we can do for soils management. So I don't believe we're at risk at this point for that savings going down because of what we're trying to do with soils, whether managing on-site or off-site. It's a matter of actually increasing the amount of the savings.
Okay, thank you.
Kip, this is Katie Lublin. I had a question for Luke and Dr. Adley. I was curious if we moved forward with the alternate phase strategy and we did not demolish any portion of the existing building, if the plan would be to keep the 2 classes of ELP at Oxbridge for the next 2 school years.
This is Alan. So that big question I want to clarify in the actual design of that new phase in terms of the way we have used those spaces for the other spaces. I'll also just chip in that the most desirable thing is what has been alluded to as a possibility is keeping if we can, the kitchen intact. But I would have to just check those spaces to make sure that we have the space to actually keep the kids, the ELP kids. Ideally, that would be the best thing, but I'm not quite sure. And maybe Amy could comment on whether the spacing is there for that.
Sure. Yes, I can answer that. The description that's on the screen right now shows that the new building in the proposed phasing would be 25 feet away in the east-west direction and 52 feet away in the north-south direction from the existing full wing, including the ELP classrooms. So this is an increase and a comfort level that we did not have in the previous arrangement, where we were building the existing building very tight to the new construction. I don't know if you could see that where my cursor is now. Way over here, we only had about 12 feet between existing building and new construction. And now we have 25 feet as a minimum.
No, I think the question is that under the new design with where the spaces that we have there for the new gymnasium and the cafeteria and so on, it doesn't require us to move out the ELP. I think that's Katie's question, I think, in terms of...
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This wing that's under my cursor here includes the 2 ELP classrooms.
Okay.
Mhm. Good. Any other questions from committee or ex officio members?
Hi, this is Diane. I just wanted to comment that I think based on all of the points that have been made, I think this is a really positive direction for the project. I think it's a good alternative. There doesn't seem to be much of a loss, and I think most importantly, it leaves the building intact in its entirety and actually without construction at the start of school, as Dave Cravenzola mentioned, which I think is really critical considering the climate we're working within right now. So I think this is a really good direction, and it just frees up the schedule a bit. It's a cost savings. I support it fully. I think it's a good direction.
Thank you.
Well, we've heard from Dr. Zadley and Dr. Forshaw. They both seem to think this is a positive approach as well. And it's, obviously, it has an impact on the school. I would recommend that if we have no other questions, that we make a motion to adopt this alternate phase as against the original enabling phase. So I'd be open to a motion to do that.
This is Diane. I'll make that motion.
I will second it.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor signal by saying aye.
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 Are there any abstentions? Are there any nays? Accordingly, the motion has been passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's Randy. Can I ask one quick question?
Please.
Sure.
The documents that were provided to the building department for the old phase 1 demolition, et cetera, are they all moot? And should I instruct the building department to ignore them?
Yes, I believe so.
Yes. They all revolve around the partial demolition and the creation of temporary space, which is not in this revised phasing.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
This is Kep. I agree. Those are now moot.
Okay. Thank you.
And Randy, also looking at this slide, the ZBA issue is really how much area we'll be covering during this construction period. And you can see with the full Oxbridge School currently staying online and building the new academic wing, all it's really going to change is the calculation of what is the percentage of space covered during this construction period. And I think that's what we talked about originally. Correct, Amy?
That's correct. So I will contact Jeremy immediately today after this meeting, because the preview that we have already presented to ZBA or the documents that they've received do show the other situation. I'll quickly do the calculation. The building that will be built at the same time as the existing building is standing does not include the assembly wing. So I think the offset of square footage for your area coverage won't be very much different than what it is in the calculations that we already provided. But since it is a different document, I'll have to find out if it's okay to present that on Wednesday night, or if we have to send them new information and a new application. I hope that that's not the case.
So do I.
Amy, do you need the updated site logistics plans for this upcoming ZBA meeting?
We did not include the site logistics plans in the original application, Dave, so I think we're fine without them.
Okay, I know we are working on them right now. I just don't know when they will be completed, so I wanted to make sure I understood the due date.
Sure. No, for tomorrow, I need to provide the slides that we'll be presenting on Wednesday night, but my first step is to make sure that we're still allowed to present on Wednesday night since it is a different document.
Understood.
Hi, this is Diane. Question for maybe for Randy or for Amy too. Just to clarify that it seems that our ARB approvals as well as the planning and zoning discussions, nothing with regard to those approvals and presentations needs to be altered with regard to this change. That can just continue to move ahead. I just wanted you to confirm that.
So I can confirm that that's correct as far as this decision goes. This particular phasing shouldn't change it, but there may be changes necessary that we need to present to the ARB and or planning and zoning, depending upon what other value management strategies are selected during next week's building committee meeting. And Kemp, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. I agree with your assessment that if certain value management items are accepted by the committee, that may require us to provide an update to the ARB. I do think that the change in phasing does need to get flowed into the planning and zoning application in some fashion. So we'll have to have that conversation with Jeremy as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Dave, this is Rusty.
Yes.
When do you want the solar panels off of the roof?
We would not be, let me just get that schedule back in front of me. I've got it open on my.
I've got it.
We would not need the panels off until I'd say, if we base on January 1st, 2022.
Okay, thank you.
So if I might interrupt, does that represent a savings to the soft costs for phase one, Dave? Something that we should include in the calculation for savings?
Yeah, I think we did prorate, a portion of the panel removal for phase one. I don't know, Rusty, with deferring any modification of it to 2022 instead of in two phases, do you think there's any overall savings, or do you think that the numbers you had provided are pretty much going to be the same? It's just it'll be done in one phase versus two.
I think there will be a savings. I'll talk to John Carbone today and I'll get you a hard number for that.
Okay, and I'll add that as a line item on our sheet where we're compiling those phase one cost savings, so that way we know that that's a placeholder to fill. Thanks.
All right. I'd like to move on to the next item of business, unless there's anything else to be discussed on the alternate phasing option. We've received some letters from concerned parents. And I would say that in general, the issues that they raise talk about the concerns with reduced indoor space, which I think we've eliminated as a concern today. Significantly reduced outdoor space. Well, part of it is they're going to lose the large open field at the southeastern portion of the property as we do the building. However, if we are able to move the dirt storage to off-site, we will increase dramatically the amount of play area, recreational area available to the students during the construction phase. We don't have an answer yet, as I told Mike Alfieri earlier, but we certainly are working on it. And I think that if we can do it, it would make a major difference to the educational experience during the construction phase. Other things that they raise, shared entry. Well, we only have one driveway for construction and for the students and for the buses and for the faculty. That can't be changed. The question is that a health hazard? the return to a stable and familiar and comfortable learning environment. I think that we've done as much as we possibly can to ensure that it's the same environment that they're leaving and that they left in March. And the challenges to the staff with reduced space, well, we've solved the reduced interior space, but there would be ongoing construction. Some of these things really are more for the district administration and the Board of Education to be addressing, and for Dr. Forshaw and his staff, and not necessarily things that come within the purview of a building committee. But I hope that we have at least demonstrated our willingness to consider the issues that affect the children and the parents and the staff with this alternate phase one. Katie, you're closer to the parent organization, and maybe you'd like to make a comment here.
Sure, thanks, Kip. There were really sort of 2 points that I just wanted to kind of make as reminders to the public as a whole. The first being that I think today's meeting in particular highlights just the evolution of the project and how much work really goes into this, and how every time we convene and we look at a problem from a new way, we're really making it better and better, which I think has just been very evident from the very first drawings that we saw from SLAM, which were exciting in their own, and to where we're at now. So I'm very pleased with the progress and the process that we've had for this project. And then into my second point would just be that I just want to reiterate that I'm always open to speak to any members of the public, and specifically parents who have concerns. I welcome comments, questions, and concerns. I think that this committee has been very appreciative and fortunate to have such great communication and dialogue with both the Oxbridge and Darien Public School administration. We're very thankful for that. So, you know, if there's any way that I can ever help to answer some questions, clarify the bulk of material that we go through in every meeting, please don't hesitate to reach out. All of our contact information are on the ORVC page of the town website.
Thank you, Katie. David, I put your name on the agenda. You may wonder why, but I don't think that the public really understands the normal, and Andy Ashworth as well, the normal protocols that you all use during any kind of construction phasing, especially around an elementary school. Maybe you'd just like to make a few comments of that. I know you made those comments at our meeting with the parents at the school at the time.
Sure, I can talk about that. Again, some of the fundamental things that are outlined in our site logistics plans and that will be revised is that, you know, our goal is to maintain separation, no intermingling. And this, you know, this approach is consistent with that, in that before any work starts out there, there is a clear and distinct separation between any and all construction activities and any and all educational activities, whether it is a fabricated barrier made of wood and insulation, or a fence with a privacy screen on it. That is a non-starter for us. You know, that is always there in place. As far as workers go, even though we will be working on the separate side of fences and walls, we do still, as a practice, we conduct background checks on every single employee who comes to work on the project. They are all given a site-specific safety orientation that outlines rules for not only how to work safely on the site, but their behavior when working in on a campus that is occupied by others. You know, as far as smoking policies, language, things of that nature. You know, as far as controlling access to the construction area, you know, our goal is to always have our field office, which will be staffed by at least 3 full-time on-site people at all times of construction, is right at the entrance to the site, so that at all times we have eyes and ears on what is coming and going from that construction site, to make sure that you know, no one who does not belong in there is entering. As far as being a good neighbor in all of this. We will be, reaching out to the neighbors with our contact information. I think we even talked about this in our presentation to the committee last year, with our contact number. So if there is ever a concern, that they know that they can speak directly to us at ONGAP with any concerns, whether it has to do with noise or dust or something like that, and not have to worry about going to the committee or someone else. Relative to the concern of the shared driveway, while it is a shared driveway, our goal is to mitigate that by staggering and prohibiting deliveries to and from the site during the times that that driveway is used for school pickup and drop off.
That's great, Dave. I appreciate that. I'm sure that many people have not heard about all that, and I know it's part of your standard operating procedure. And I just think it was great to go through it one more time for everybody who would be listening in.
Sure.
Are there any other matters that the committee would like to bring up concerning this building project at this time? I hear none. Is there any public comment today? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. This is Michael Alfieri.
I second it, Duke.
All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
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 Any abstentions? Any noes? Thank you very much for your participation this morning. Meeting is ended.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
I'll stop the recording.
Thank you.
Thank you.